See a woman coming with a loaf of bread and take it from her. The things like this were going on for the days that we were in Wismar. It was just sheer pandemonium.
We were the only Canadian unit to link with the Russian army.
We had 2 or 3 fellows who spoke Russian.
And although we had been briefed on what to look for in terms of uniform, rank, discipline, and so on, we quickly found out that these were largely peasant rabble, terribly undisciplined, and determined to get into the city.
It was touchy for a while because the Russians wanted to advance through Wismar, and we said, no go.
And they said, well, you'll have to go. And I said, look, one of mine will take 7 of yours any day in the week, and if you don't believe me, try it.
They at times appeared to be more our enemy than our ally, until about 2 days later, some of the uniformed armored elements of the Russian army arrived, and they set up a roadblock about 50 yards from where we were. And then we managed some dialogue.
The ultimate upshot was when the 2 of them met, dear old Montgomery, the egotist that he was, decided that he would find out from the marshal how many armies he commanded, and asked the question, how many armies do you command? I command 2, says Montgomery. Rokossovsky quietly said, I command 7. So that got things down to a fairly level. Things got sensible, and that was it. It was our base.
I know a Russian column came up where I was on duty, and came up to us, and we halted the column, and they jumped out of their half tracks. And their crews were half women and half men, and they had wristwatches. Because they shot, they were really getting their own back on the Germans. And the worst thing is that they were feeding us this bloody vile vodka. They could handle it, but we couldn't.
On the way back to the unit, I stopped by a woman on the side of the road. And she said, there's a train, and she pointed to a train off in the distance, a couple of 100 yards away, on the side of the road. She said, I have a trainload of women here. We were evacuated from a hospital in Rostock, and most of them are sick and wounded and hurt, and we have no food. The train has run out of fuel. The engineer and all the train crew have left us. We have no food. Our toilets are all plugged up. We're in desperate condition. Can you help? And I thought, oh, God, what the hell can I do? Anyway, I got some of my men who could drive the vehicle, and back we went. So we loaded these people in. I went down and walked through the train. One woman was dead, laying there dead. And some of them were so far gone that we had to carry them out of the train. Anyway, we started out, and by this time it was pitch black. And I'm leading this gall darn convoy in a captured German civilian car. At one point, of course, no lights on any of the vehicles, pitch black, and trying to remember how the hell I could get back into Wismar to get where I wanted to go. And we got them all to this gymnasium and got them settled. Thank God there was running water. They stunk like hell. Talk about human misery, you never saw anything like it. They were scared to death of the Russians. By the time I finished with all this, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm wandering all alone back across the schoolyard, and one of my men came running towards me. The moon was shining, and he said, "Sir, the war is over." That's the day the war ended.
I don't know, it was a kind of, I guess, a feeling of relief. And I said to myself, well, I don't know, I've survived, it's all over.
As I recall, it was a sort of an anticlimax.
Well, one really didn't quite know what to do. Everybody was happy. Everybody wanted to celebrate in some way or another.
And so there was no celebration at all. In fact, we were still busy dealing with the civilian population and the Russians, and a tremendous number of escaped concentration camp survivors who had made it into our lines, and they were terribly emaciated and badly treated.
And the fact that I got pulled out to go to the hospital meant that I was not going to enjoy the fun at the end of the war, the usual parades and ceremonies.
It felt very nice, because I'd been, shall we say, an active victim of the things that happened during a war, and I was shot in Germany with a machine gun. 2 is enough. As a matter of fact, that's overdoing it a little bit.
So we had to get out of there.
The men of 1 Canberra left an indelible mark on Bulford, England, where they trained, and are remembered with plaques both at the Garrison Church and at the Rose and Crown, where they spent their leisure hours.
The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945, but for the men of the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion, questions remained about further service in the war in the Pacific against Japan. Most of the Canadian paratroopers hadn't accumulated enough service points, credit for time served in accumulated battle theaters, to immediately head back to Canada. And there were some who wanted to be reassigned to the war against Japan. But as the Canadians were repositioned to their original base in Bulford, England, orders came to return home.
What do we do now, and how do I go about extracting the troops out of Germany via England and back to Canada?
He was able to put together enough aircraft to fly us back to England.
The Canadian government wanted us back from the British 6th Airborne Division, and that arrangements had been made for us to fly back to England and to our base in Bulford.
The war was still going on in the Far East.
Although we had all volunteered to go with the division if they were to go to the Far East.
Some of us were still young and didn't have enough points to get back immediately.
There were 5 ships at Gurrick in Scotland that needed to meet a sailing date, and they were troop ships, and that maybe if we could get down to CMHQ, Canadian Military Headquarters in London, to talk to them there, maybe we could talk our way on for a few of the guys to get home, particularly those that had been there for 4 and 5 years.
And all of us on that train landing in Bulford after that shortened leave, which only lasted a couple of days, we were all quite convinced that we were on into another operation somewhere. So it came as a great surprise within 10 or 12 hours that Colonel Leedy spoke to me and said, I'll talk to your company commander, but you guys are going to have to gear up. We're going home immediately. You've got 24 hours to clear the camp.
Word got around very, very quickly, and by gosh, they came back. So the things were happening so quickly, it was pretty hard to know how you felt, except it was really good to know that you could go about without getting shot at, and secondly, that you were on your way home, one way or another.
We're going up to Scotland, and we're boarding the Ile-de-France, and we're heading back to Halifax.
But we actually came back with about 1,000 men, nursing sisters, wives, airmen, Navy people, everybody, and us.
Coming home on the boat on the Ile-de-France, I met funny, I was walking on deck. There was hundreds of people, thousands on board the boat, and I was out walking one day, and I met a fellow from the same street as I had who was in the Navy, and he was coming home, and we both looked at each other and we said,